Welcome to Weber Brothers. This is the unfiltered edition. Today, September 11th. It's 10:56, and we wanted to take this opportunity to get some content. And we got Dr. Moss, Brother Moss on the airway, and Brother Ruben. So I'll let Ruben moderate this thing. Ruben.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Right. You know how that introduced the topic. Related to, it was coming on the tail end of the mental health month. And given everything that we discussed in those, in that dialogue, I just wanted to touch on, as Black men, do we celebrate ourselves? And is it done effectively? Is it done enough? And to each one of the brothers, just to ask the question, do you celebrate yourself? If yes, when, where, how, and what does that look like? If no, why not? And just, what impact, can that behavior of celebrating oneself have on your emotional health or your mental wellness? So I asked that question because I feel like we are conditioned to maybe not do that so much. So I put that out there. You see what your thoughts are.
Well, I think you're onto something, because we have a tendency to only focus on the areas that we need work on, the areas that are broken down, or the areas that we want to keep hidden from our friends and our family. And we pay a lot of attention to those weaknesses that we notice and recognize in ourselves. And that's real easy. It's real easy to see your flaws, to see the gaps, to see the ways that you've fallen short and where you've missed the mark. And I think it's real important for us to recognize that we can't compartmentalize who we are as men, that we can't just take one area and focus on that and believe that that is the sum and total of who we are as men, that we have to have a balanced approach to who we are. And that's how I think God sees us. There's a balance, that there are some things you got to work on, but then also there are some great achievements that you've done. There are some things that you may not recognize as positive, but your family might say, yeah, that's a big thing you did for us as a man in our family.
Wow, that was extremely insightful. Balance. Yeah, I took some nuggets from that one, Dr. Moss.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I kind of get that, because when I was doing some counseling, and during my PhD work, I did some counseling at the Student Center at University of Notre Dame, the counseling center. And, these students would come in and they would have, relationship issues, they would have some self-esteem issues and that kind of thing. And so, you would talk to them, and when you got into a university like Notre Dame, you had to do something. You just couldn't just walk in. You had a pristine record, academic record, and you had
Mm.
all these um, volunteer things that you had to do and leadership things that you had to do. So you had a kind of a full resume to get in there. And so they come in and, in their high schools back home, they are the big fish in the, in the pond. It's like they're the top student, valedictorian, that kind of thing. But they get to Notre Dame and all of a sudden they're among other big fish. And they don't feel as though they've accomplished anything because the other person accomplished more. And so they begin to, and then they get their first C on their test or a first D on an exam that they've ever gotten in their lives, and their whole world falls apart. And so they come into the office and we start talking about what's going on. And the reality is that they've allowed the one failure or two failures to determine their own sense of self. When in
Mm.
fact, it took an entire person to get into Notre Dame, not just one part of you, but the entire person. And yet, when they get there, they start focusing on just the piece that's not quite up to par from their perspective. And so, a lot of my work was just encouraging them to take a look at the overall picture, to balance that out, to not only see the things that you need to work on, but also, like you said, celebrate and recognize the things that they've done well and are continuing to do well as they go through Notre Dame.
Wow, I think that's so, the way you describe that, that's so prevalent in so many ways, um, to the point where we start defining ourselves, based on, how our inadequacies, you know, run the
Yeah.
risk of doing that
Yep.
versus, defining yourself on the whole picture, taking your
Right.
accomplishments and everything into account and doing that. And for those students that do well forever, and then they get, they don't, they write a term paper and then you turn around, you have a C or whatever takes place. That's catastrophic. That can be catastrophic. I had a coworker at one point whose son went away to school, going for engineering, one of the top engineering schools in the country. And he always done well in school, consistently. He got there, being away from home was a challenge in itself. And then not getting all A's and struggling. And he left school. He came back home and got a job at Best Buy.
Mm.
So whatever took place in that mindset during that time, it's almost as if he maybe fell into a rut or had to restructure or regroup. And Best Buy was just not on the scene.
Right.
When you look at his potential, it's like, how did you go from this school to Best Buy? And he rebounded, went back to school, went to a community college, and then to a university, um, and went on to have a very successful um, career. And I think he changed his major a little bit into more computers and IT. But it was a shock to the entire family uh, for him to feel that way about anything that he's doing, and for him to take that course of action, to leave school and work at Best Buy and go to community college and everything. So, and I often think about the discussions we've had in the past where Marcus has asked, how do you condition, you know, your children or someone to deal with a situation like that? And I believe that, I feel like I don't celebrate. I have not celebrated accomplishments enough, or things that I thought were just an expectation, was how do I celebrate something I expect to do? But it took work to do it. And so, for many years, it goes unrecognized as an accomplishment until, just like you stated, Dr. Moss, I had family members who may say, you've done this, look what you contributed, look what you spent time to do, and this was the outcome.
Yeah.
And even then it was challenging for me to say, oh yeah, that is. It's like, well, I was, so
And I think,
it seems, oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
It seems like a like a simple thing to do, but it's challenging. And I had to put together just small benchmarks. So if you set a goal for something, you achieve it, it's worth some recognition. I'm not going to throw a party for it. I'm going to recognize the fact that I set out to do something and I achieved it and celebrate it.
So I just wanted to chime in here, and obviously I heard the actual question. Do we celebrate ourselves enough? No, to answer your question directly. I don't think that as Black men, as a culture, as Black, just as a culture, not really generalized to Black men per se, but as a culture, we just, I don't know if it's something psychologically that's affecting us as people. And I'm not even, and to say that it's a Black thing, that might be a little bit much too. Because I just think that naturally it's always hard to look at, the nuances of every detail of a particular challenge, so to speak. I'll give you an example. My daughter scored her first her first goal yesterday in soccer, right? So obviously she got complimented, and I was very happy. She was obviously happy, but within that same time span, as a dad, I chose to critique her and assist her with some of the challenges of the game. And I was questioning myself. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, even at that moment. And sometimes as parents, we have this urge for perfection or to teach at every given moment. Now, another approach I could have took was just stay just strictly positive and said, baby, you scored first goal. I'm so happy. That's the only thing I care about, right? How does that affect her in the long run? If she's going to be used to every time she does something positive, that there'll be a negative connotation that follows that, or should I prepare her to always be, positive in every situation? Those are the challenges that I challenge myself on daily. And I think that discussions like this need to happen, and there's never going to be a perfect solution. But I think if we set the expectation with our children and with kids, I think it'll be beneficial in the long run, psychologically, for them to always know that the celebration is within. The celebration shouldn't be contingent upon me or you. Even though as family members, we should always celebrate our loved ones, right? But internally, that should be something that should be self-controlled, not in a way that shows lack of humility, but in a way that shows that you have high self-esteem about yourself. And oftentimes we don't celebrate ourselves as like we should, man. There's a lot of educated people out here, um, and there's a lot of educated minorities out here. And sometimes through the media and through propaganda, we don't always get the recognition. There's a lot of Black bankers, a lot of Black engineers. We're in every industry. And a lot of times we don't see those images because we don't control, we don't have control of the narrative. But once we decide as people that we're going to start doing the best we can individually, I think from a holistic standpoint, we'll start to see a better outcome. Now, I don't know what the overall effects of that it's having on our community when we don't celebrate ourselves enough from a holistic standpoint. It's just independently, I can see that without representation, sometimes it's hard to establish goals. So, for example, if I don't see the Black personal banker or I don't see the Black lawyer, then I don't really strive to be that because I don't see it. So I think psychologically that has an effect and on one's mindset, and it's something that we need to do better at.
Yeah, you raised some good points there. I know when it comes to critiquing or running that risk of being a Debbie Downer at a high point, something that I tried to do many years ago, especially with certain things that I may be more proficient in, and then I'm critiquing someone else that may be more of a novice at it, is whatever the outcome is, I think it's the most important component to that is understanding or asking them, how do they feel about it? How does that make you feel? Based on what you just did, how does that make you feel? Then I would follow that up with my thoughts and my children. If I'm proud of them, it's like how far. It's almost like of course you're gonna be proud of me. I'm your kid. So, so it's one of those things that dig deeper is just really. I try to get a, a gauge on how it made them feel to do certain things and have them articulate that, whether it's considered a success or a failure. You know, um, I think there's ways to talk through that maybe that may help someone to get a better sense of self.
Those are good points. And I think that part of it is, and maybe even for me, the fundamental issue becomes, am I worthy to be celebrated? Do we feel worthy? Is that something that is in our makeup? Because we look at our society, and everything in our society tells us as Black men that we're not worthy to be celebrated, right? That the culture around us says no. In general, I mean, there's some specific instances where that might not be the case, but in general, given the kind of the white supremacist environment from history till now, Black men in the culture have been thought to be not worthy of being celebrated. That we have this image of fear around us, this image of lack of progression, this image of hypersexuality around us that says that we're not really worthy of being celebrated. this whole idea of our society really moves towards mediocrity. We don't want anybody really to stand out. Everybody's got to be the same. And if you celebrate yourself, then you're trying to stand out. You're trying to be arrogant. And one of my bosses told me that one time when I was just kind of saying, this is what I bring to this place. She told me, yeah, it sounds like you're kind of stuck up there, David. You're a little arrogant, right? I was just kind of saying, this is the value that I bring, and this is what I have around me that's a positive that can impact the work that we're doing. But she saw it as me stepping out of my mediocrity and trying to step above to be a little arrogant. And I think we also think about the idea of self-criticism. You know, we have been told, I know I was told that you got to be twice as good, right? And so if you got to be twice as good, you can't rest on anything you've done. You've got to move on to the next thing right away. You can't sit and reflect and let what you've done settle in. You can't rest in that success. You've always got to move on to that next thing because you've got to be twice as good. And that's one of the things that kind of we've been ingrained with as Black men. And so those are some of the things that I think allow us to have this impression that we're not worthy to really accept the celebration.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't even considered that aspect of it.
Dr. Moss,
Yeah.
man, I love when you're on here, man.
Yeah, I had to ditto that. I ditto that.
I'm not trying to be offensive to all the other brothers, but it's like when you talk, I be taking notes.
Oh man, come on now.
Yeah, it's like the old E.F. Hutton. Not to give E.F. Hutton any credit, but
I just
right.
Flowers, man, and it's nothing against anybody else, but man, you really throw out some gems, and I appreciate you being on, and it was one of the reasons why I was like, no, we're gonna get this thing recorded today. But
I suspected that, Marcus. You got Dr. Moss. He want to get some content.
hey, so listen. With that said, right, I just have a question, and so from your generation, right, what and I don't want to put your age out like that, but I'm curious to know, could you name 5 to 10 Black men who were actually celebrated accordingly during your generation? And if so, could you name them? Because I really want to write the names down. Now that are, and this question could be for both of you, because I really, Dr. Moss, can you do non-athletes? And then Ruben, could you do people, if you think of an athlete, could you do that, do an athlete as well? I just want to compare the two.
And when you say celebrated, just to drill down on that for me.
Well, I mean, you the one moderated the question, so the celebration I would think would be through the imagery, through the media, through prestige, through the cachet, through through our communities. For instance, just I know Muhammad Ali during his generation, there was nobody that could even, like, he was that guy. But what I'm trying to illuminate, and I'll get to my point, and I guess I'll go ahead and make my point now. What I'm trying to illuminate so we can discuss this is how our community celebrates the athlete first. They celebrate and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm trying to compare that to the other races. And I'm trying to see if that has an effect on our community and the imagery and the celebration as such, as it relates to the athlete and the doctor.
I will give my thoughts on that. Unfortunately,
name the people first for the.
Yeah, it's probably gonna take me a minute. It's probably gonna be more. They're not gonna be national celebrities. I could put one out there that I believe has been celebrated, but I don't know how much he celebrates himself because I don't know him, and that would be Jay-Z. You know, Master P. Um, and I'm not just sticking to that because of the music content. I'm referring to them as businessmen and how they were moving behind the scenes, where music was just a catalyst for them to achieve some of the things that they've achieved. You know, so but I can get you 10. I think I can have some that are a little bit more um they may be more local, but yet, you know, celebrated, you know, for their achievements.
So you got Jay-Z and Master P, Dr. Moss. You got some names you could throw out?
Well, you know, interesting enough, the name that popped into my head first was a name that was not necessarily is not necessarily celebrated now, right? So it was Bill Cosby. You know, he was kind of celebrated, but then after a while, of course, he had that issue. So now that's been kind of taken away from him. And that was the first thing that popped into my head. You know, guy who celebrated. But then you look at he was celebrated because of his ability to entertain,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
So you got one?
Got one so far. I'm still going through my head. I mean, people like, you know, Lionel Richie was in my generation. I mean, so, but once again, he's an entertainer.
And that's what I want to get to. So
I will say, but the point that I was going to make when you actually get the two people is
sorry about that.
when you look at the community, oftentimes, you know, they're going to revere what's going to be revered is what they have knowledge of. So that's why the athletes and maybe the musicians, you know, can stand out, and that's why maybe you don't know about a Ben Carson until, you know, something comes on television. You know, Thomas Sowell, you don't know about these people until it comes up somewhere. And that's where I really feel like we have the opportunity when it comes to whether Black inventors or folks that have been the first of something,
Right.
and great achievement. You know, Weber Brothers gives us the platform where we could put someone like this out digitally on a weekly basis. And I have a database of this stuff because I try to learn. I didn't know that the wooden golf tee was invented by a Black man.
Yep. Yep.
You know, that blew my mind when I found that out. So there's so much, and this gives us the opportunity to change, to attempt to change the narrative, so to speak, because we can create some exposure for, you know, these type of contributors, you know, in this work.
And I think that gets back to my point of, you know, our society tells us that we're not worthy to be celebrated, right? Because remember that movie, I'm sure you've seen it, called Hidden Figures?
Yes.
With the women who really got knocked up on the map, right? I mean, here I am, a man who does work in diversity, a man who does inclusion conferences and presentations and workshops, and yet I did not even know about those women until that movie came out.
Wow. And you think about how inspiring that is.
Hello?
You know, for someone to, you know, how that may change the scope of somebody's life, of a
That's
youth,
right.
youth man, powerful.
That's right. Right.
And not only having the acumen to do what they were doing, but still, despite the prejudices, despite the things that they had to do to even show up and do it, they fought through and still did it. Incredible.
Yep. Exactly. And looking at the impact that could have had on my daughters growing up, had we seen that when they were 6 or 7 years old, right? And just the the way that door could have been open to the possibility, because I think Marcus said it earlier, that sometimes we don't recognize the advancement we can make because we don't see examples of that for us to follow. And if that had been taken into account, man, imagine where our Black young girls could be now in terms of engineering.
I gotta say something.
Yeah.
And you know, I always give I take pride in this, right? I always get, and just by the way, Justin just joined in, so let's give Justin a round of applause. But
Hello, Smitty.
All right, Justin.
Good morning.
So, but anyway, back to my point, right? I was always like, I take pride in this, and this is kind of, you know, this is part of my personality, so to speak. But I always try to give that take that, like, maybe is not so tactful, I guess, or diplomatic, and I let you guys kind of determine what you guys think about this question. But are we shucking and jiving, right? And just for the record, I want to give the actual definition of shucking and jiving. In the African American culture, shucking and jiving is joking and acting evasively in the presence of an authoritative figure. Now, let me tell you how I'm going to bring this all together, right? When I asked you guys who you thought of when you thought about Black role models, the imagery of the Black man, right? I got Bill Cosby, I got Jay-Z, and I got Master P.
Well, you didn't say role models.
Not role models, celebrated.
You just gave examples.
Celebrate, yeah.
Who are celebrated?
Yeah.
Men who celebrate in our generation.
But effectively, let's just say majority of the people from our culture are going to look up to these people as role models. They're the only thing that we see. I'm just saying the majority, right? All of the content, all of the social media, you know, when you look online, Jay-Z is on there all the time, right? Especially during the time when he was hot, right? But the point I'm trying to make is, and you kind of threw me off for a second, but the point I'm trying to make is that the authoritative figure in this landscape is people who don't look like us. They're the people that control the media. They're the people that own the stations, right? And to me, we're only good for imagery when we're dancing, when we're rapping, when we're making you laugh, but we're not good when we're underwriting loans, when we're solving problems logistically. They don't want to see that. And I think we have to put the proper term to it. And I hate to do that, but that's the reality of it, right? You ask any kid nowadays, their top 5 role models, right? I guarantee you Drake gonna come up, Kodak Black, Rod Wave. That's gonna be consistently what we see. So what happens with that is that subconsciously, not only does it affect the mind, but it steers and directs us into certain career paths. And until we understand that, right? And there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, I think it's really, you have to be very careful not to generalize that to the community. Because again, I think exposure is key. And for children that are, for lack of a better phrase, well-read as it relates to our community, they're going to have different exposures. They're going to be able to maybe develop different role models out of that.
But Dr. Ruben, but how can they be, and I'm not generalizing it. I mean, it's the reality. It's like, it's the only thing that you see when you go on social media. And right now, that's the biggest content-driven sector that we have in this world. So I'm not generalizing it, like it's the reality. It's the social media star is now the Muhammad Ali of their generation. So,
But I kind of feel like we're getting away from the celebration of oneself a little bit,
not really.
unless you can tie it in.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to tie it all in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
My apologies.
no problem. But overall, what I'm saying is that to get back to the celebration part of it, because we're only celebrated in one sector, right? Sometimes it's hard to make the kid that's well read and well versed feel in his mind that he's good enough, he or she is good enough, when the community don't even when the community don't even see it as a, something to celebrate, something to acknowledge, right? Something to the Black kid that goes to Lakewood, that and not Lakewood, I'm just saying, that's the first school came to mind, but that graduates valedictorian, right? Where is that image at? Where is that imagery at? What happens to that person when he goes to Notre Dame and graduates? Where's the social media content that's based around that image so that my child can see, so that they can grow up and emulate? You don't see.
Well, I think the key is to, is that's something that has to be built in. That's maybe coming back to why some do, why some don't actually do celebrate themselves within their accomplishments, within their existence. So outside elements, can have less negative influence on who they are.
That's kind of so you're saying the Weber brothers, as it stands right now, could have such an impact that people who follow the Shade Room would then start to follow Weber brothers.
So this is what I'll say. What I'm trying to say to that is the Shade Room. You want to explain the Shade Room?
Yeah, I don't know Shade Room.
A gossip, basically like a gossip dialogue, a gossip podcast, basically. Is that fair? Or
social media platform, millions of.
Well, I can say that I see the Weber brothers as putting out positive, insightful content. Gaining exposure for these Black leaders, these contributors to our way of life now. The ironing board, so many different things, that we had a part in that existence, so we have that opportunity to do this, to project positive influences and content, into young Black men as a whole, and into the Black community as a whole, quite honestly.
agree. I know I'm coming in late, so I don't want to mess up the conversation. So I just want to make sure. Were you asking a question, Marcus, or were you kind of making a statement?
Just to give you the to put some context on the discussion this morning, and this was Ruben's question, is do we celebrate ourselves enough? When, where, and how? And I don't know what part you got on that, but Dr. Moss obviously spoke that.
Well, you let me on.
No, what I'm saying is, I don't know what you, like, I know I let you on, but I don't know what you missed, so to speak. But I'll just give you a rundown when Dr. Moss brought up some good feedback in terms of self-criticism, being suppressed by the celebration. And these are just my notes, so y'all can chime in if I'm wrong. And I asked them about, some people that came to mind as far as generational wise, who our community celebrates, and I think, or celebrated, and I think Bill Cosby came up, Lionel Richie, Jay-Z, Master P. So that's where we at, just to get you caught up.
Okay, so I didn't miss much. Okay. So you were asking the question, or it sounded like to me that your concern is that the main way in which people are getting their information today doesn't project Black men or Black people, period, in the light such that we have people looking up to, having role models that are outside of the artist and athletic field. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. And your concern is that our kids are growing up with the wrong role models?
No, my concern is that the role models that they're being forced to admire is being directly driven by other races, strategically.
And you're saying that's different from 20 years ago?
No, I'm not saying that that's different from 20 years ago.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. I didn't know.
Yeah, and that is the reality of where we are. And that's the reality of what's always been. I mean, people who have power are determined to keep the status quo the way it is because they have the power. And if they allow individuals to see their complete value and their true worth, then that will upset the apple cart. And they can't afford to let that happen because their own self-worth is built on our lack of self-worth.
I like that.
Right, that's right. There it is.
You gotta repeat.
Well, and that's kind of what I was kind of thinking in my head is like, you know.
That again real quick, because I'm taking notes.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Moss, say it again, I think.
Your own self-worth is what?
Now y'all know I can't be repeating stuff. I mean,
because I understand that sentiment very well. Their own self-worth is of value to them because they keep our self-worth down.
Right.
Theirs is just built on ours being reduced.
That's right.
That is an accurate. That is 100% on point.
Their own self-worth
Their own self-worth is based on our lack of self-worth.
Sorry about that. Man needed some food on the side of the road. I missed you. Did we get Dr. Moss to get rid of his Alzheimer's?
See, now why you had to go over there? I mean,
because you be trying to act like you old, man, just because you got a little gray up there. We know you're a young man. But you know, it's interesting we say that because it's like, you know, I've had, you know, I'm always thinking, and you know, I do sometimes take it a little personal when I feel like people kind of play down on people who are acting as well as people who are athletes, especially when you start reaching into the higher levels, because I think that there's, you know, it is a profession. And I think that for me, at least, is something I know that Cedric has said a long time ago. It was almost like as Black people, we can only pick one thing, and it's like we don't have the ability to be moguls the same way others do. It's almost like we have to pick that we're just going to be an athlete, or we'll just be an engineer, or we'll just be versus just having, you know, the world kind of as our oyster. And the reason I mention that is because it's like, I feel like, you know, for a man to work with his hands anymore, that's not honorable. That's not seen to be as though it's a value, right? But everywhere you look around, there's construction. And if a guy knows how to lay that tile or build that, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, that's a skill that, like, it never goes away. You know, even down to, now we talked about before too, even like cutting hair. You know, and it's like we have all these skills that I think we always have, but we don't value them. Going back to the point of just valuing yourself and valuing like who you are, what you know, so on and so forth. Because of, you know, and maybe this is what you were getting at, maybe because the things that we put value in. And maybe that's where some of that social media stuff comes from, along with, and I think maybe that's where you're going with that, Marcus, is just, you know, your role models, who you see in front of you, who you see around you, who you see that looks like you. And I know that's probably my biggest rub, another reason I coach football and everything, but is, you know, I look at it from the standpoint of my daughter's school, and I was actually having a talk with another Black lady about it yesterday, whereas, you know, my daughter's school has 0 Black people in it, meaning like teachers. They might have other students, things like 5% with Black and a bunch of, you know, the rest of the rainbow. But not one teacher is Black. Not even custodian or janitor even more. They used to have a lady who used to clean up, you know, she was Black, you know, but she was there. They don't have that anymore. So it's like, who does my kid see from 0 to 8th grade of any bit of authority at school, right? Because think about it. I mean, all of us have had kids before. We know teachers say something, boy, you know, sometimes it might be hard to change their mind if the teacher said it. You know, because that's their point of authority. That's where they learn. So it's like when you don't see anybody that looks like you, then like you say, you know, kind of to your point, Marcus, and I'm on social media and this is all I see, you know. And I don't see it in my neighborhood, and I don't feel like I see people who are praised as much for doing things outside of, you know, being a athlete or being an actor.
And
you know, where it does. Go ahead.
and I think the challenge is, and I can relate very intimately to, you know, coaching with kids, and I can just give you a scenario, right? The kids that I was coaching at the time, when I was coaching high school football, and I had several businesses and stuff going on at that time, right? I wasn't an attractive role model to them. But when they saw me in the bins and they seen me outside of, you know, they seen the
Yes.
I was still a businessman. That for whatever reason, we have to find that humanality, just algorithm to not only be attractive to those kids, but to where we can make the guy that's laying cement still look cool. The guy that's building a house who has on the work clothes and has the hammer in his pocket. That guy that's doing that, he has to have in his mind, hey, how can I still be cool? Because I may not see it, but they see me. And until we figure that out, and that's the excuse me, that's the perfect equation for our community.
I want to know some thoughts on that. I want to hear some people's thoughts on that.
Okay, so you want me to break it down? You want me to clarify a little bit more?
No. I just want to hear Ruben and Dr. Moss's thoughts on what you just said. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that goes back, you know, and I'm going to try and stay on task with this. I think that goes back to what we place value in. If we place, as a community, if we start to value the Mercedes, and these are things that we do value. We value the material things. Then the people who have those material things, whether they're doing it positively, negatively, are going to garner attention. You know.
Look, are you saying there's something, just to be clear, are you saying there's something wrong with that?
No, I'm not. I think the understanding behind it, I think there's a bigger way to think about that. You know, and I always use this as an example because it's been successful in the response from youth. I've been able to evoke some thought. You know, they can tell you what new Jordan is coming out, how much it's going to cost, how much they can resell it for. And, you know, the majority of them are just buying it to really wear them. And so my daughter, you know, she went through when she was her sophomore year. There's a particular pair of Jordans she wanted in high school. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not feeling this Jordan thing. I'm not dropping this money. So she got it the first day they came out for $150. Same day it was selling at the resale store in the mall for $250, $225 to $250. So I said, so what are you going to do? You're going to buy them and resell them? And you're going to get you some and then you're going to buy them? What are you doing? So no, I just came to pick mine up. Oh, okay. I said, so I said, you know what? Do you know what the Nike stock is trading for right now? And at that time it was $56 a share. I said, so you're about to spend, you can buy 3 shares of Nike for these shoes you're about to buy, and you have no ownership in it. I said, so if you're going to indulge in something, try to position yourself to where you benefit from its success. So how many people out here spending tens of thousands of dollars and don't have one share of stock?
But that
So I fast forwarded to, because she'll be graduating from college now, and she
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, she did it. She's graduating early, so it wasn't that long ago when she got the sneakers when she was in high school. It was 5 years. So with that, the Nike stock was trading, and I sent her a little text, $166 a share. And I just illustrated how many Nikes have you bought up to that point? And if you had to put them dollars, and say it was $1,000 or whatever, I just tried to illustrate what her money would look like right now.
But Ruben, can I play devil's advocate to that for 1 second?
Sure.
What if that dentist that she saw was wearing those Jordans? Why wouldn't you want her to emulate that dentist?
No, it's not about the dentist and the Jordans. It's about what you like. Because don't get me wrong, I love it. There's a lot of things that are expensive that I love.
I understand.
But it's a mindset. It's a mindset. So if I know I can buy shares of Nike, why would I continue to or even Starbucks for that matter? You know how many people love to go to Starbucks and don't have a share of Starbucks? It's just my own personal thought process on if you're gonna indulge, I think there's a way to do it, unless you just have the means to do it, and it's all good. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Because a lot of the folks that are buying the Jordans, if you really talk about what they can afford, they don't have the means to be buying those sneakers. And they further remove themselves from any immediate prospect of buying any shares of stock. So that's just my personal thing.
I guess, could you summarize, because Justin was trying to get an answer to the question, so I just want to get for clarity, just to understand from a viewpoint, how are you connected?
Yeah, I think there's a mindset that I think there's discussions that need to take place with youth as it relates to money, as it relates to things, that I think would be beneficial on how they view things.
And Marcus, my perspective on what you were saying is one that says you are absolutely right, that kids are focused on certain things that draw their attention, certain values that our society has said, these are important things for you to pay attention to. And if you want to have worth and value, you need to possess these things. And these things will give you the value and worth that you're looking for. The only way that we can counteract that, the only way that we can come against that is through relationship. We have got to get away from this idea of a broad-based multimedia splurge campaign to touch our young people. because those messages are so ingrained and so powerful in our culture. The only way you can counteract that message is to actually have great relationships with our kids. And that is a way to break through that.
I agree with you 100%. You hit the nail right on the head. But
Absolutely.
So the challenge, I hate to say but I'm just trying to forecast some challenges with that. So how do you have a great relationship in scale? You see what I'm saying? Because if Dr. Moss affects 5 children locally, that's still cool. But where does that leave us as a population? And I think that's where we need to look at, I think it still brings us back to the relationship and what Ruben was lamenting, made a lot of sense. So I think combining the two through the media, through the social media, through the social media platforms and any other type of platforms is the challenge. Because a lot of times it's tough to get that personal relationship, but we still have to make it cool. You still have to make Dr. Moss, the Dr. Mosses of the world, the Rubens of the world, the Justin Smiths of the world look cool, the people that are a million miles away from us. Because it's not a lot of them. And when you're fortunate enough to have that 1% that's in your community, that's in your region, they need to be highlighted effectively to have the impact. I'm just forecasting as to the overall change.
And I really believe that we can't necessarily focus on the big picture in this arena. I just had this talk with my kids about a week ago, that because they are in my family, they have the favor of God on their lives. And when you have the favor of God on your life, there are people who will come in opposition because there's envy and there's malice. And so you've got to be prepared for that. I've done some pretty, God has blessed me to do some pretty amazing things in this community. And yet there are still people who are envious and oppositional to the things I'm trying to bring. So I understand that I have to focus intentionally and then allow the seeds I plant to bloom and blossom in the people I'm working with, right? So, and maybe it is because I'm of a certain generation that I'm not necessarily focused on social media type things. But the thing that I've seen is that if I can get into a good relationship with 10 kids on my robotics team, and they take those seeds that I plant in them and hopefully multiply them through their friends and maybe even through families they may have later on in life. And then if I can encourage other men to do similar things and they can touch those kids, some kids in their sphere of influence, then I think we can have, at least from my perspective, an impact. May not change the whole world, may not change all of America, but we can have an impact and actually improve the lives of those kids that we're working with.
Hey, Dr. Moss, can you, off the subject for a little bit, can you give us some information on the robotics just for the record so that we could, the people that's listening could look it up, they could, so they can get more information on it?
Yeah, it's a part of the FIRST program, FIRST, and it's an acronym that stands for, well, you can look it up online. I don't even know what it stands for, but First Lego League is basically 9 to 15-year-olds, and you have a robot, a brain that you add Lego pieces to, and the brain can move and do things on a certain board. And if there are competitions across the country on it, there are thousands of teams every year that participate. And very few African American students participate in that process, in that program. And I was exposed to it through my son, who was we homeschooled our kids for a little while, and he got exposed to it there. And when I went to the competitions, I noticed it was a lot of folks who were, majority, and very few Black folks involved, very few Black kids. I took my team to an international competition 2 years ago, and we had 8 Black kids on my team, and out of 61 teams, you can have 10 members on a team. Out of 61 teams, there was only one other team at this competition that had a Black student on it. One other, and my team had 8 Black kids.
Wow.
Right. So this is something that I think, science, technology, getting kids involved in that kind of activity. And for me, it's not that they're going to be engineers one day. I know Justin would want all of them to be engineers, but not they're going to be engineers, but that they're learning how to think. They're learning how to do some research, learning how to process information, learning how to think that, yeah, if I wanted to, I could do this, but maybe I don't want to.
Hey, what's the website real quick?
It's FIRST, First Lego League.
I just wanted to get that on record. But I commend you for that, my brother. That's an awesome thing. In fact, my daughter, she's at a STEM. STEM Saturdays this morning. One of my best friends, he does a STEM Saturdays probably like once a month. So
okay,
you and him, and he has about 20 or 30 kids. I'm gonna send you a link too. But between you and him, you the only 2 guys that I know that are involved, within our community. And I just want to commend you guys because I love STEM and my daughter loves it, and you're doing something great. And I definitely commend you. But yeah, getting back to the conversation, I just wanted to just have that on record because I know you mentioned it a few times.
So what I'll say is I agree that I think you were definitely on point, which is why I wanted to hear from both Dr. Moss and Ruben. The issue, I think, I think Dr. Moss hit on the head as well, is we tend to try to want to solve the world problem or the nation problem, when I think it's far easier to focus on our local problem, because I think that's really the biggest effect you can always ever have is at a local level. I couldn't agree more with, and let's just face it, I think we all to some degree look at a person, we all have that bit of judgmentalness in us to some degree, based on, a person's appearance, right? We may put more value in the shoes or the watch, the car, the house, but a lot of times it kind of gives us a level of respect for that person. And a lot of times feel like the more successful, quote unquote, they seem, which usually relates to the money they make, which is the things that they have. You just tend to give that person a different type of respect, like they, automatically we need to listen to what they say. And so I would say that I think that does play a part with our kids, and I've seen that. But the other thing, a couple of things I know that came from what I heard, specifically when Dr. Moss mentioned something, and you even said it too, Marcus, with regard to the number of people that that actually do stop, right? And I think that honestly is what becomes the biggest biggest issue of it all, because we have situations where people do get kind of caught up in life and raising their family, and they get so caught up in kind of taking care of their own situation that it's hard for them to make the time to quote unquote give back and to make it intentional on, saying, hey, I noticed that when my kid was going through this, there's a great opportunity and they just need more people or somebody to come spearhead it. And even though I don't have a kid still involved, I'm still going to do it, And I think that, unfortunately, you can't make people do it. But at the same time, I think that when you take it on at a local level and you become more and more visible and you grow bigger and bigger as a network of people. One of the ones that's coming to mind right now is like the All Pro Dads. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them. But there's a whole organization. Yeah. So I actually got an invitation at my daughter's school to be a part of it. And I know it's very religious based. Okay.
It's not a ton of religion in it. But,
may not be a lot of religion in it, but I know that it has a very, and I only know that just because like I said, it's Tony Dutchy, but regardless of.
But to I think, and I'm just sitting here thinking, right? I'm not saying, and maybe that's my ignorance, because I think that most people would think that these type of programs don't exist, right? And they could very well exist. But the issue is, how do we bring these programs to light within our own communities, within relevant platforms, so that people are aware? I think that's the challenge. Because getting back
and I kind of disagree with that part as much as they have to see value in it. No. They have to see value in it.
Hold on a second real quick.
That's the thing. Go ahead, I'll let you go.
Let me finish saying what I'm saying. But getting back to Ruben's initial point is, or was rather, how do we celebrate ourselves, when, where, and how? That's the key. Like, that's the topic of discussion. It's the Dr. Moss exists, so we need to celebrate Dr. Moss.
Well, it's the Dr. Moss celebrating himself.
Though.
It's the individual.
Right. Yeah.
It's not the celebrating of anyone else.
Let me kind of tie all this together for us, okay, if I could. Let me tell you how I celebrate myself. And so I'm hoping that this might be a way for other Black men to celebrate themselves, right? And I discovered this years ago. I have in my possession something I call a good job file. A good job file. And I have a good job file for every job I've ever held. When I was working at Florida State, when I was working at Notre Dame, when I was working at South Bend School Corporation, and now that I'm working for myself as a business owner. I have a good job file for each of those jobs I've ever held. And in that file, I place every letter I've ever received that said, Dr. Moss, you got it going. Yeah, thank you so much for your support. You don't know how much you blessed my family by. Your creativity was amazing. You added so much to this meeting that we just held. I print out those emails. I print out those text messages. I keep those thank you cards, those thank you letters that I receive, and I place them in my good job file. And that gives me an opportunity to balance out all the negative stuff I have to face every single day. So when I have a day where I'm kind of feeling like, well, you know what? This is kind of a little rough go at it this day. I open up that good job file and I start reading the impact that I've had in the lives of others by being who I am and the job that I do. So for me, that provides that balance and opportunity to remember why I should be celebrated. So that's something I challenge every Black man to do, is to create this good job file. So in those moments where you may have a little doubt about what your value might be or what you might contribute to the world around you, you now have physical evidence. And we all get the letters, we all get the thank you notes, we all get the little cards. we now have that physical evidence that balances out some of the difficulties that we face. And that's what I wanted to say.
I like it.
And I know you can't hear me that well. I've never used my brag book that way, but you know, that's actually a great idea. But I think maybe to your point is I don't know that I've ever truly celebrated myself. So I think I can say with confidence, I don't know that I've ever done it. I've probably done more the opposite, right? And I've felt sorry for myself more than I've taken the time to quote unquote celebrate myself. Because in a lot of ways, to celebrate myself, I almost feel like I'm vain.
And that's what society wants you to feel. They want you to feel as though you must be mediocre like everybody else. And so because your celebration shines a light on maybe some inadequacies that they might have, that they feel as though their sense of self isn't as strong as it should be. So therefore, I'm going to bring you down to my level so that we can all be in the same muck and mire together, and not going to allow you to feel as though you excel.
So let me ask you this. Would you consider a person who throws their own birthday party to be celebrating themselves?
Sure. Yeah, I would say so.
I'm interested just in the other people because I used to really look down on it, but you're making me start thinking different about it now.
Well, I think, you know, considering I just had a birthday past 3 days ago, or 4 days.
You did, and I meant to tell you happy birthday. I'm sorry, and I had it on my thing.
Oh, no. See that phrase, right there?
I already know.
That phrase right there? That I meant to tell you. You know, I appreciate it, but there's no apology needed. My thought process and my feeling about birthdays, you know, it takes 364 other days to get there. You know, or 363. But given that, it's like every day, I think deserves equal celebration. You know, so I try to keep it. I try to keep it commensurate with my existence. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful, and I wake up every day expressing my gratefulness for each day. So I don't have to have special things take place on my birthday. This has been a struggle for my family, and I've been called difficult because it doesn't really matter. You don't have to do anything special. I'm grateful for it. So I came up with this new term called Happy Life Day. I can say that to somebody every day. You know.
Well, Ruben, let me challenge you, brother. Let me challenge you on that, because I think that in some ways, for you to deny them the opportunity to celebrate you, I don't know.
And I don't take it away from them.
It might be a little selfish.
No, I don't take it away. I don't take it away from them. They just understand my sentiment on it.
It's very simple.
And I think that, and I don't disregard other people's birthdays. I'll text and call somebody, tell them happy birthday, the whole nine. But I just don't want people to feel like that's a requirement for me. So if you choose to do something, I'm not going to not do it. Like I did several things on my birthday, but it was not a requirement.
Right, because I think that people who want to honor you on that day, they're not celebrating you for that day. They're celebrating you because of who you are and what you have poured into their lives. That's why they're doing it. They're not saying, hey, you were born, all right, we love. No, they're saying, you are so important to us that we want to honor you for the gifts that you have given us. And
I receive it. And I do receive it.
Okay.
Well.
All right.
But when somebody say, what do you got planned for your birthday?
And let me just ask this real quick to the point of the birthdays. I said it Ruben, I think it's selfish, and I'm not trying to say it in the, I'm not trying to be rude with it. And I'm only saying that because it's my dad's birthday today, and he's the same exact way. And what it does is the disposition that you guys have, people feed off your aura. So you can tell them, hey, you don't have, I'm not going to turn you down, but we know. And it really just like, he don't really want to do nothing. Like that's how the people on the outside looking in to it. And it's just like, it's frustrating because you want to do the most because it's your dad and he's done so much for you, good or bad or indifferent, he's your dad. So I can just, I just feel that way personally. And then what happens is subconsciously, I used to channel those same inner perspectives from my dad growing up. I'm like, I don't gotta do nothing for my birthday. And then it carry on from generation to generation. And I think that's part of our problem. Back to that psychological aspect of, we subconsciously feel like our life day, our importance on being on this earth is just mediocre. And to a degree, I don't agree with that disposition. I just feel like
if I can interrupt you for a second, okay. I think this is even bigger towards Black men, because Black women gonna make sure you celebrate them. Go ahead, Mark.
That's true.
Correct. And and I would just challenge you, Ruben, just to change your perspective, because you may have people who kind of, and I'm not saying you're against birthdays, I heard exactly what you said, but I think that if you change your rhetoric, you'll see people exponentially doing 10 times more than they would with the perspective that you have now of doing what you can is enough. You get what I'm saying? I really.
Yeah, but this is where I think the misunderstanding is. Okay. Is I don't, I'm sharing something with y'all. Justin already knew this, but people don't know that.
Well, they know now.
So yeah, they gonna know now, and I'm okay with it. Yeah. But I choose to. I feel that if anyone wants to do something, that's fine. I don't push anything away from what wants to take place, but I don't want someone to have a false obligation to do something. And I feel like, I'm here every day. My birthday, if you want to be honest, a birthday is not unique to someone, because I'm sure there was millions of other people born the same day I was born. But I feel like we should celebrate one another, wholeheartedly on more of a regular basis than just finding that particular day out of the year to say, whoa, I have to celebrate you because it's your birthday.
But you're not pushing.
Now, what I'll say to that is that being raised a Jehovah's Witness for most of my life, I've adopted that same mentality. And I think over the years, what I've learned with that was to allow people to do what they want. Because I'm the same way as Ruben is, where it's like, what's for my birthday? Hold on, what day was that again? You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'll forget when it is. I know the time frame as we get older, but, at the same time, it's like, there's nothing special about that day. But it's like kind of thinking about what we're saying. And even the way I've learned to approach holidays now is, kind of more like Dr. Moss is saying, because I used to always say, well, Mother's Day, why are we just taking one day? Father's Day, it should be every day, da, da, da. And that was always my mentality. But I've been, especially now after this conversation, because I don't celebrate myself. So hell, if there's one day I'm gonna do it, at least let me remember on the day that I was born that, hey, I made it around again. You know what I mean? Maybe I should, even if I don't even include nobody else, like, he's saying. And I just do me. It's usually what I do, to be my day. And actually, the past couple of years, to be honest, what I've been doing is actually giving my parents gifts. Or people that I feel like are real close to me, I'll give them a gift. And just tell them thank you for, being in my life, making me who I am. But, but I think I may take that page out now and actually do that now. Dr. Moss, thank you.
Well, hey, you know what? I'm inspired. I'm inspired that, when my birthday comes around again this year, instead of just letting folks do for me, I'm going to contribute to the process. I'm going to join in and make this thing really happen. That's my commitment for this next birthday. Thank you, gentlemen.
Now, the only thing I'm gonna say to that though, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, next year I'm gonna say, yeah, take me to this restaurant. But I was, the whole time we were thinking, and I was like, you know what? But every person that always asks me that, I think they just trying to set themselves up. It's like, okay, if I do for him, then I know he definitely gonna have to do something for me.
No.
You know what I mean?
That's funny.
All right, fellas.
But but I'll be. I know you got to go, Mark. So if you got to hang up, I know we'll probably miss the recording. So if we want to go around real quick and just kind of give, based on the synopsis of celebrating yourself, just something everybody can kind of take from this. If you want to start, you were kind of hosting, Mark. So if you want to start, Ruben or Wes, then we'll go Dr. Moss. I'll go next, and then you close it up, Mark. And if we want to keep talking, we keep talking.
Perfect.
I like the idea of, like Dr. Moss mentioned, he can reference, letters and things of accomplishments or how he's sown into the people and their sentiments on it. So I think I'll take that away from our discussion today. To add to, adding to how I celebrate myself, I want to have that log that I can go to when needed and say, hey, okay. And I think it's great. I think this, falls under memoirs.
So for me, I would say this. I was talking to someone this week about the escalator of life. I was talking about it in spiritual terms, but I think it applies here that, you may think you're just standing still, but in essence, the escalator of our culture is taking you down, right? And the different images, the different impressions, different types of language we use. So unless you are making effort to step up the escalator, it's going to take you down, right? So the idea is that the celebration piece is actually mandatory for us, that we have got to continue to elevate our thinking and continue to reinforce who we are and our presence on this planet so that our culture, the American culture, doesn't continue to move us into a negative place. We got to keep moving forward by our own effort. That's what I'd like to say.
No, it makes absolute sense, and I mean, from both of you, just serious nuggets of, just learning how to celebrate yourself. One of the phrases that came to thought when you were talking about the escalator, Dr. Moss, was, I like to use the devil don't change, the devil, change you. Just meaning that, what you're around is 9 times out of 10, 10 going to change you more than you're going to change it. So I think part of being able to celebrate yourself is like kind of knowing who you are, being happy with who you are. And so I think, really taking that deep dive, because for me, people are going to treat you, how you allow them to. And when you know who you are, I think part of that and being happy with who you are allows you to probably be able to celebrate yourself a little more, which we don't do enough of. And so, I'm hoping that, people can really take inventory of themselves and find some things that they can really look to celebrate, even if they got to go back, like you said, and find those old thank you cards, find old birthday, whatever it is that you can put together, because, you take a lot of beating in the world every day. And you need something, that you can have to reinforce and kind of feel that change. So that'd be my couple 2 cents. Marcus.
You're muted, Marcus.
Sorry about that. Again, this is another great conversation, guys. I really enjoyed this conversation we had today, personally. Nice selection of topics, Ruben. Dr. Moss, brother, I appreciate the gems that you throw out there, as well as yourself, Ruben and Justin. I took some good notes. My sentiments relative to celebrating yourselves pretty much mirror everything that you guys said. Only thing I can add to the context is being kind of grounded in knowing who you are as a person and where you came from and the legacy in which you are looking to uphold. I think that goes a long way. And that alone is enough to celebrate internally and externally. And I think conversations like this need to happen more often, so that we can always kind of set a level of expectation, so that brothers like ourselves and people that's hearing this podcast can have something to reference to. But I love the idea of the good job file. That's something that I'm going to actually personally look to implement. And I know when other people hear this, it's something that's probably going to resonate with them as well. So great conversation. I appreciate all of you guys. And until next time.
Hey, before I sign off, I am going to, this is a discussion for another day, but it is almost criminal how I celebrate Father's Day.
Oh, Lord.
Everybody knows. It's not even a day. Justin knows this. It's a week.
Listen.
Wow. There you
It's
go.
almost like a complete opposite. Like, how you go from saying the birthday is this, but when it comes to Father's Day. But anyway, we'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah, that's good.
I love it. I ain't mad at him, though. I ain't mad at him, though.